Do you want to spend the rest of your life selling sugared water, or do you want a chance to change the world? On a New York penthouse terrace in the spring of 1983, Steve Jobs asked a single question to seal his recruitment pitch. Apple in the early 1980s was panicking. IBM was rolling out personal computers, and Apple's leadership, headlined by a brilliant but recklessly immature Steve Jobs, left the company rudderless and totally unequipped for a corporate war. The board of directors and founders looked at the impending threat and decided they desperately needed adult supervision. They wanted an experienced executive who could drag Apple out of its Silicon Valley startup phase and turn it into a massive Fortune 500 corporation. They found John Sculley. As the president of PepsiCo, John Sculley was an introverted pragmatist who climbed the corporate ladder to become the youngest president of PepsiCo. He had zero experience in technology, but Sculley knew how to sell to the masses. He had engineered the Pepsi Challenge, a highly successful marketing campaign that helped Pepsi steal massive market share from Coca-Cola. Jobs spent months flattering Sculley, calling him the best person he had ever met, and promising he was the only one to understand Apple's potential. Jobs personally recruited Sculley with an intense courtship. The two spent hours walking through Manhattan, exploring museums and record stores, while debating design, art, and the future. Overlooking the Hudson River from a penthouse terrace, Jobs delivered his legendary pitch. He looked at Sculley and asked, "Do you want to spend the rest of your life selling sugared water, or do you want a chance to change the world?" Sculley, despite having zero experience in technology, admitted the sugared water pitch knocked the wind out of him, offering a path to become a global visionary instead of a soda salesman. Both men were seeing their own desires reflected in the other. They built the most famous partnership in technology on a foundation of mutual psychological projection, leaving little room for a shared business reality. In their early months together, the two men were inseparable. They took hours-long walks around Cupertino and called each other dozens of times a day. Sculley even referred to Jobs as his soulmate, noting they often spoke in half sentences. Sculley saw himself as the wise teacher taming a raw genius. Jobs thought he had secured an open-minded Fortune 500 protector who fully grasped his artistic vision. This partnership relied on both men ignoring their fundamental differences in values, creating a situation where the eventual clash over Apple's direction would be far more explosive. The friction started with their daily operations. Sculley was a polite, budget-focused pragmatist who wanted to keep people happy. Jobs was an erratic, uncompromising perfectionist who regularly threw code back at engineers and openly berated anyone he considered a bozo. Jobs cared obsessively about the technical and aesthetic details of the products. Sculley, having spent his career selling soda, believed that marketing, budgets, and profit margins drove success. He viewed Jobs' obsession with product details as an active hindrance. The tension finally boiled over regarding the retail pricing strategy for the newly developed Macintosh. Jobs demanded the computer be priced at $1,995. To fulfill his promise to change the world, the hardware had to remain affordable enough for everyday people to actually buy it. Sculley overruled him. He insisted on bumping the price up to $2,495, strictly to cover the massive costs of a glitzy advertising campaign, a marketing-first approach that Jobs deeply resented. The pricing dispute laid bare their incompatible priorities. Jobs grew contemptuous of a CEO who didn't understand computers, while Sculley lost patience with a founder he saw as a petulant liability. By early 1985, the high price of the Macintosh led to disastrously low sales, capturing only 10% of Apple's internal projections. In response, Sculley decided to remove Jobs from his operational role heading the Macintosh division. Jobs refused to step down gracefully. Instead, he spent the week leading up to Memorial Day organizing a covert boardroom coup. His plan was to officially oust Sculley while the CEO was traveling in China. The plot leaked to Sculley. He canceled his flight, returned to the office, and confronted Jobs directly during a Friday morning executive staff meeting. In front of the entire leadership team, Sculley demanded they vote right then and there to choose who should run the company. One by one, the executives pledged their support to Sculley. Days later, the board of directors did the same, unanimously backing the CEO. Jobs was stripped of his operational duties and relocated to a nearly empty building. Jobs had actively recruited Sculley to be his mentor, but his own hostile attempt to overthrow that mentor gave the board the exact justification they needed to exile him from the company he created. Under Sculley, Apple's annual sales skyrocketed from under $1 billion to over $8 billion. But this growth hid a lack of innovation. Apple released dozens of overlapping Mac models, like the Performa, Centris, and Quadra, eroding the company's reputation for simple product lines. Sculley also made a fatal operational error. To ensure Microsoft would keep making software for the Mac, he licensed parts of Apple's graphical user interface. This allowed Windows to ultimately dominate the personal computer market. Eager to prove he could be a product visionary, Sculley championed the Newton MessagePad. He spent over $500 million in development, only for it to launch with flawed handwriting recognition and become a widely mocked commercial failure. By 1993, Apple sales were crashing. Sculley's attention had wandered. He spent time promoting his memoir, advising Bill Clinton's presidential campaign, and exploring the IBM CEO job. Frustrated by his detachment, the board fired him. Two men paired up with the intention of conquering the computing world. But because each refused to accept the actual capabilities and flaws of the person sitting across from them, their partnership fractured the company and ultimately cost both of them their positions.